Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant. The season is over, but the exhibition season is not over. And there are also some lower level tournaments still going on. For example, there's a WTA 125 that just ended with Belinda Bencic losing to Alicia Parks in the final. Belinda Bencic has been out for a while, and with this tournament, she is going to be back in the top 500. Alicia Parks, with this tournament win, is back in the top 100. On the men's side, an amazing player called Damir Džumhur, who had a career high ranking of 23 in the world, won 6 challengers this year. And he just won a challenger in Portugal, which means that he's going to finish the season in the top 100. An amazing accomplishment. So believe it or not, there are still tournaments going on. The season is not over. But I want to more specifically talk about Carlos Alcaraz, who some people accuse of being a hypocrite, because during the ATP finals, Carlos said that the schedule is too tight and the season is too long. And he has been the king of exhibitions this year. Let's go through the list of exhibitions that Carlos has played. So he played the Netflix Slam against Rafa. Then he played the Laver Cup. Then Carlos played the Six Kings Slam, and he just participated last week in 2 exhibitions in the United States, one in New York against Shelton and one in Charlotte against Tiafoe. And it makes sense that people don't understand his statement when he goes out and plays all these exhibitions. But I'm going to defend Carlos, because there's a big difference between exhibitions and real tournaments. So when it comes to the Six Kings Slam and the Laver Cup, I do think those are a little bit different, because there's a lot of money on the line and there's a huge discrepancy whether you win or lose, especially in the Six Kings Slam. So I do believe that players are playing for real in those tournaments. So I wouldn't really consider those as classic exhibitions. But the matches he just played against Shelton and Tiafoe, those are real exhibitions. And he's not going 100%. So it's pretty safe on his body. And he's having fun. He's making a little bit of money, and he's bringing excitement to the tennis world by playing these exhibitions. Fans want to see Alcaraz, and this is good for the game. So I don't think it's a problem that Carlos is playing exhibitions. He has every right to do so. And the fact that he's complaining about the ATP season being too tight, he's got a point, just like Iga had a point when she complained about it after the tournament in Cincinnati. Now, some of the old timers, for example, Yevgeny Kafelnikov, took some shots at Iga back then. And I understand the sentiment from the old school players, because they played when the season was just as long as it is now, but they played best of 5 sets in Masters Series finals. They played best of 5 sets in Davis Cup, and they possibly played longer matches than players do nowadays, and they weren't complaining as much as some players do today. So I understand where they're coming from, but things in tennis have changed, and there are now more injuries than ever on both the ATP Tour and the WTA Tour. And I did a lot of research prior to making this video, and studies in the past have been conflicting on whether players are getting injured more. But the recent study from Barcelona that you can look up on the Tennis Nerd website has confirmed that players indeed are now getting injured more than before. And the reason for this is crystal clear. The balls and the surfaces have been slowed down, which is leading to more extended rallies. And when you have more extended rallies played at the incredible level that they're played at, you are naturally going to see more injuries. Combine that with the mandatory events that both ATP and WTA players are forced to participate in, you're going to see more injuries, and we're seeing that now. And the simple solution, something that will never happen, is to give players more freedom and let them choose the tournaments that they want to participate in. But as I said in last week's Monday Morning Tennis Rant, tennis is all about the superstars, and ATP and WTA want to guarantee the tournaments that the superstars will show up, and that's why they have mandatory events. For you guys that don't know, The small tournaments have to pay a lot of money to get someone like Alcaraz to show up at a 250, for example. So mandatory events don't have to pay appearance fees at all. So tournaments are not going to get rid of this. And let me give you one example of what an effect a superstar player can have to a tournament. And the money that these tournaments pay for these superstars to show up is well worth it. So I lived in Delray Beach for 12 years, and Delray has this awesome street called Atlantic Avenue, where you have a bunch of restaurants, and it leads right to the beach. And also on this street is a phenomenal tennis club called the Delray Beach Tennis Center, and they host tennis events, and one of them is an ATP 250 tournament. And I've been to this tournament almost every year, and I've never seen the stadium sold out. Even when Del Potro played one year, it was packed, but it wasn't sold out. The only time I saw the Delray Beach Stadium sold out was during an exhibition that featured Coco Gauff, and this is before Coco Gauff won the US Open, and she played the #1 player from the University of Miami. That is the only time I saw the Delray Beach Stadium sold out. Now, of course, some of this is related to Coco having trained on courts very close to the Delray Beach Tennis Center at Pompey Park, and she's from Delray, so you know, local fans were very excited to see her play. But still, the superstar status in tennis is what drives tennis. It's what drives everybody to tune in on TV, and what drives everyone to come to the tournaments. And unfortunately, for that reason, the mandatory events are not going to change. Players are going to continue to be forced to abide by the tough schedule. And to make things even worse, this is a change that I don't approve of, is the extended Master Series tournaments on the ATP Tour. Next year, 2025, 7 out of 9 Master Series tournaments are going to be 12-day tournaments. They have added Cincinnati and the Canada Masters to the list of tournaments that are 12 days. And for some of you, it might make sense to think that players will have an extra day to rest, and this will be good for them. But as Andy Roddick said on his podcast, players don't need a day off if they win a match 2-2. Players train their whole life to be able to play consecutive best-of-3 matches. Of course, you can have a freak match that lasts 4 hours, and you might be really dead the next day, but generally players are going to be just fine playing consecutive matches every single day. So for that reason, it is somewhat unnecessary to extend the Masters Series tournaments, since they are played best-of-3, but it goes deeper than that. You have to realize that players are under an enormous amount of pressure when they are in a tournament. So it's not necessarily the physical stress that they're under, it's the mental stress. For any of you that have played a tournament, just think how nervous you are when the tournament is taking place. And then once the tournament is over, it's like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. Well, you can multiply that by 1,000, and that's what the players at the very top are experiencing, the pressure from the sponsors, from social media, from TV viewers, from the people in the stands. They have an enormous amount of pressure that they're dealing with, and while they're in a tournament, they're dealing with that pressure. Also, players are not able to work on their games while they're in a tournament. This is something that I've been saying for 6 years since I've been on YouTube, because so many players have used Roger Federer as their perfect example of the technique that they want to copy. And unfortunately, back in those days, the only footage of Federer that was available in super slow-mo was footage of Roger Federer during the tournaments, where Roger Federer is very relaxed and barely moving. And I've had students that showed up to the court trying to copy this relaxed state. And let me just say, I didn't like when I saw this, because there's a huge difference seeing Federer during a tournament training and seeing Federer training for real. Federer trains very hard when he's not in a tournament. And another player that some people think doesn't train very hard is Fognini. And Nikolai Davydenko in the Functional Tennis podcast said that Fognini trains incredibly hard, and during the tournament he is a little bit more loose. And of course, this makes sense. You don't make it to that level unless you're training unbelievably hard. So the fact is that when you're in a tournament, what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to prepare yourself optimally for the matches that you're going to play, which involves not burning yourself out in practice. Now, of course, there's Roger Federer, who's extremely loose in the practices during the tournament, and there are some other players who go a little bit harder. But fact is, players are not going to necessarily tinker with their technique in the middle of a tournament, and they're not going to burn themselves out. They're going to save their energy. When do players have a chance to tinker with the technique? Is when they're not playing a tournament, and that's also when they can work on their physical strength. They can, hit the gym and do more physical work that they're not necessarily going to do during a tournament. So extending a tournament to 12 days is going to be tougher on the players because, number one, they're under that pressure for longer, and they don't have as much time to work on their game. So I think this is a very bad change for the ATP. Not only are players forced to participate in these mandatory events, but they're also forced to stay at these events longer. They're basically are going to be playing 7 Masters Series tournaments that are like Grand Slams. There's only 2 days difference. Add Grand Slams on top of that, players are spending a lot of time at tournaments. So I don't blame Carlos for saying what he said during the ATP finals, that the schedule is too tight. The season is too long. It is getting tougher and tougher for these top guys and top female players to handle a season like that, not only physically, but also mentally.